you've done podcasting for a long time about real estate investing, and then
Yep.
you took a break for a little while, and then you came back, and you said that during that break, you were working on this mastermind that you're involved with, and you sort of had some realizations as an investor. So I'd love to hear like some of your big realizations over the years and what's sort of changed in what you're doing.
Yeah, love to. And I, one of the biggest regrets was taking a break from my podcast. So don't do it. But the reality is I did it because not only was I involved in the mastermind, but I pivoted my business model in real estate up until that point. This is so around 2015, at the beginning of 2015, I was a flipper, a house flipper. And I had some run of bad luck with my contractor and my realtor at the time, who was integral on my power team. He provided me with a lot of information that I needed. And I kind of had an issue with both of them that was nothing we could really recover from. It was just some bad dealings and bad attitudes on their part. And I had to part ways, but I was still getting opportunities. I was still getting leads. And at the time, I knew what the word wholesaling was. I just didn't understand it. But I was getting opportunities, and I'm an aggressive, like I'm a risk taker. You give me an opportunity, I'm going to take it. So I was going and signing contracts, not for sure how I was going to rehab them. I didn't have a crew, and I was kind of like, at a crossroads, but I had opportunities to sign houses for a very big discount. So I signed a contract, and I got home and said, I can't even do this realistically right now. I need to go back out and find a contracting crew. But I know people in my area who are also house flippers who are complaining nonstop that they can't find deals. Though those guys were looking on the MLS exclusively. Around the end of 2014, maybe mid 2014, I started doing direct mail, and nobody in my market was really doing that very effectively. So I was getting deals they had no ideas about. They had no idea how to get them. So I called my buddy and said, hey, I got this deal. At the time, I signed it for 95. And I called him and said, you want to buy it for 110? If you want to, just let me know. And he goes, give me 10 minutes. I'll call you right back and let me do some due diligence. He called me back and said, I'll take it. I was like, whoa, because I normally make about 20 grand on a flip. And there's a lot of hassle that goes into that 20 grand, right? Back then. So I was like, done. And then I got another deal like a week later. It was almost identical house, identical situation, just crazy identical. And I called the same guy and said, I got another one for 110. You can have this one too. And he goes, give me a minute. Called me back. He's like, I'll take that one too. I'm like, whoa, this is great. So my model switched to wholesaling. And right at the end of 2015, I joined the 7-figure flipping group. And that was, I mean, like, talk about back of your head being blown off. I met some folks in that group. I mean, Bill Allen, you reference, is one of them. But when I met him, he was a brand new investor. He had done one deal. He had no team. He had no idea what was going on. But he was a smart guy. So just to kind of articulate, when you go to these meetups or meetings or you join a mastermind, there was a guy in there. His name was Andy McFarland. Still to this day, the best human being I've ever met, but also one of, if not the best investor I've ever met. He's a phenomenal guy. And he was kind enough to kind of show me what he did. He was about 3 to 4 years ahead of me in his progress. In other words, I was at the time where he was 3 or 4 years earlier. And I said, Andy, what did you do? Like, what happened during the 3 years from where I am to where you are? What did you learn and what did you do wrong? And I just really just picked his brain, and he was very forthcoming. He told me everything that he did right and wrong. And I said, well, if it took you 3 years or so to do that, and you had to do it organically, like you were making mistakes along the way, just normal, course of business, right? You were learning as you went. You didn't know. I said, why can't I do that in a year? If you did it in 3 years, and I have your hindsight, if you had hindsight, you could have done it sooner. And he's like, yeah, you probably could. And that's exactly what I did. I took all of his lessons learned and the stuff that I already had learned to that point and applied it and just accelerated. I literally got into that mastermind and I bought speed. I bought 3 years. I went from being a $250,000 a year company to over $1 million a year company in less than 12 months, just by standing on the shoulders of the people who had come before me. And that was the big epiphany. So during that time, a couple of years there, I built the thing, got to $1 million. It's kind of a funny story behind that too. When we got in this, the guy who was running at the time, his name is Justin. it was a small group. It was a brand new mastermind, like brand new. There was no curriculum. There was no materials. It was just like, hey, let's just get together and like hang out and share information. So we did it. And there was like a group of probably 20 of us, 20 businesses. And he's, Justin's an impulsive guy. And he's like, all right, the first company to get to $1 million, I'm sending them to Hawaii. And we were like, you talk to a bunch of type A people,
Yeah.
and we were like, whoa. So I called my wife at the lunch break, and I'm like, hey, this is what the challenge is. She's like, get on it, because I want to go to Hawaii. So long story short, my partner and I we went after it. We were the first people there. We talked him into sending us to Fiji instead of Hawaii. So we actually went to Fiji for free. Yeah, it was awesome. But along the way, it's like you get somewhere that fast, there's inherent cracks in the armor. We built our machine so fast that we had to go back. The second year was a lot of rebuilding some of the foundation, like fixing things that we'd kind of done poorly. For us, it was like brute force. Like we got there by force of will, and we didn't build probably the most solid foundation. So we had to go back and do some repairs. So a couple of years there, I'm building my company. I'm kind of going back and doing some retroactive fix to the way we do things and building some more. Stepped away from my podcast. But just to kind of go back to that first meeting when I said, you just don't know who you're going to meet. I sat next to Bill Allen at that meeting. Now, the meeting was, this group, this mastermind was supposed to be full of experienced investors helping each other out, like people who had achieved something. And Bill's sitting there with one deal. He got in, right? It's a new mastermind. And I think the requirements to get in got a little loose in the beginning. And Bill's sitting there and he's like taking notes furiously. And, I'm talking to other people. He's taking notes. And at the break time, he said to me, he goes, hey, where are you getting, because I was doing postcards, mailing postcards out. He goes, where are you mailing your postcards out of? Like, who are you using? And at the time I was using, I think, Click to Mail. And he's like, what are you spending for a postcard? And I said, like 48 cents or something. And he goes, oh, I'm spending like 33 or 34. And I go, at the time, with the volume I was doing, by just changing to who he was using, because he had a better deal going than I did, it paid for the entire mastermind for the year. That one tip from a guy who probably had no business being in the room, didn't know anything much about real estate. He's just a smart guy, right? Yeah. So when you're at these events, man, you got to talk to people, and you just never know where the gold bombs will come from. But yes, that group was largely, if not solely, responsible for the success I've had in the last 5 years.
Hey, thanks for joining for this segment of the interview with Mike Simmons. If you want to check out the full interview on the podcast, go to the Living Off Rentals podcast on any podcast player. You can also join us in the Living Off Rentals Facebook group. It's an awesome community. You can ask your questions or start a conversation. I hope to see you there, but if not, I will see you in the next video.